Constitutional carry, permitless carry, whatever you call it, we're talking about it. It's Mitchell Talks, the News 9 Stations with Aaron Brillbeck. Coming up next. Hello, Mr. Brillbeck. It's good to see you.
It's good being seen.
I'll just tell you this. This last week and this coming week, it's going to be crazy out there, and you've got a guest who's going to be right in the middle of it, right?
This is Don Spencer. He's with OK2A, and he's the gentleman that wrote the constitutional/permitless carry bill that just passed out of a House committee, Public Safety Committee, and now goes onto the House floor.
Hi, Don.
How are you doing? Good morning,
Good
sir.
to have you here.
You appreciate it.
Tell us about the bill.
Well, I don't know why it's controversial. It's already a right, so it should not be controversial. It's already been on the governor's desk last year. We're just making sure that the rights are restored back to the people of Oklahoma that should have never been taken away in 1907.
What does it mean?
What the bill means is a person 21 years of age that has never had a felony and that is not convicted of domestic violence or adjudicated as mentally incompetent would be legally, if they can legally purchase a gun, they can legally carry the firearm.
The concern that a lot of us are hearing is they can carry a gun with no training, no license.
Well, if you want to make sure that it's training by a government certified person, that is accurate. But see, I don't know about you, but my dad taught me how to carry a gun. He told me how to use safety stuff. So people get training. You just don't throw a gun out in the middle of a table, and people just pick up and say, okay, there's no problem here. And actually, you can go online and learn a lot of things before you ever were to walk out to the range, including gun laws and where you can and cannot carry. So it's really an overstatement, because the fact is we're not asking people to be cops. They just want the ability to be able to defend themselves if they feel that they're in the worst case scenario and need to do so.
It doesn't preclude people from training.
No, no, and that is one of the misnomers that sometimes shows up in some of the anti-gun rhetoric that goes on with the bill. But the fact is, you have, and it cracks me up, where do thugs get their training? Somehow they manage to create mayhem, and I don't see them at the gun range, and I'm a CLEAT certified instructor, but they manage to do that. So why can't a peaceful, law-abiding citizen be able to make an effort to defend themselves? And responsible citizens, like with any other right, it takes training, it takes education, and these types of things, and that's what a responsible citizen does.
Don, what is the biggest objection that you're hearing of all the objections? What is the people come to you with their biggest concerns?
The word training, and actually I don't think the word training is accurate. I think it's education. Like I said, for me as a kid, and I don't know, maybe you guys too, we were around firearms, and it was a tool, it wasn't a toy. And maybe some of that has left society, but now we've got gun ranges all over the place. It doesn't take much of an effort, or a friend that's got some property that you can go out and shoot or practice on, or things like this. So like I said, we're not asking people to be cops. We're not putting them on offense. We're just people that want to be able to defend themselves. And we also know through society, the more peaceful legal guns there are, the lower the crime rate. It's absolutely consistent, and just because it's a natural deterrent.
And let's face it, you're an SDA instructor, Self-Defense Act instructor. I've taken the class. I think you've taken the class too, right? The class sucks.
Well, you haven't been in mine, because I try to make it somewhat entertaining. But yes, to stand there and think that a person is going to be standing 15 feet away from a paper target and it hold perfectly still, and that is a real life scenario, is completely inconsistent with reality. That is not how these things happen. I myself, not once but twice in my life, I pulled a firearm and pointed it at a person for the act of self-defense, and thank God I didn't have to pull the trigger. But the firearm being there thwarted the crime, because that bad guy said, you know what, I'm not in the right place. I don't think I'm supposed to be here. So fortunately for me, I did not have to pull that trigger, but you have to be ready and willing to, and just in case.
The other argument that I'm sure that you're hearing, because I'm hearing it quite a bit, is this is going to turn Oklahoma into the Wild West. Violence is going to go up dramatically. Everybody's going to be carrying guns. We're going to be passing them out to toddlers.
That's my favorite one, because that's exactly what they said in 1995 when concealed carry came in. They said the same thing in 2012 when we got open carry passed. People be stepping over bodies just to get to church and blah, blah, blah. And it just didn't happen. It just didn't happen. It fizzled out. And you'll see it's the exact same thing here. And keep in mind, too, in Oklahoma, we already have constitutional carry. It's just not for Oklahoma residents. It's for residents that are in a constitutional carry state such as Kansas and Missouri and a dozen more. Those people can come into Oklahoma without this so-called training and carry today, right now. So why would we not afford the exact same right to our own Oklahoma citizens?
What's happened in other states that have the similar law?
Crime has either plateaued the same or tapered off.
So you know these guys. Let's take a scenario, and I know you've heard this before, but you take a guy. You said we don't want people to be cops. We got people that want to be cops, right? I mean, you've got guys that are going to start putting them in their belt and be falling out. You know, goofy people that wanted to turn into Barney Fife, who only had one bullet, by the way. But my point is, what about those scenarios, Don? Because people are incomprehensible, right?
And the fact that I don't want to disagree that something like that couldn't happen, but who said it's not already happening now? That they're so uneducated or poorly educated. Like I say, when I was in high school, our principal brought a shotgun in the room and showed us safety instruction with it. We don't even, you can't even take a plastic knife into a school now. So we're dealing with that element too. It all goes back to education. Just like the very first time you drove a car, you were probably scared to death. But today you didn't think two things about it. And the same thing with handling a firearm. You cannot be uncareful because you could still be harmed, which is the same thing with an automobile. So it goes back to education and practice.
But to be fair, knowing that Scott drives a car scares me to death.
3,000-pound bullet.
Pretty scared too, because I'm driving my wife's this morning. Let me just ask you this: where can you not carry one now, and how would that change under? You call it permitless carry, correct? Let's just talk about that. Why the different names?
The constitutional carry is actually the purest term, because the right of shall not be infringed would imply that you can carry anywhere, and the only real exception would be a prison, jail, detention facility, because we don't want bad guys in those areas with weapons. That's the purest. The term that's used really the most is permitless carry, because you're carrying without a permit, but there are still other restrictions out there, areas you can't go into. So that's one of the things. And with this bill, House Bill 2597, if you have a license today, it doesn't change anything if you don't have a license. You still cannot carry it onto a college campus, and we've made very, very clear that you can't, and carved out the language to make sure that they're protected on it, because they're freaking out about it. Also, the business owner's rights has been a concern. Well, can a business owner get rid of a person if they're carrying a gun? Yeah, you can. Nothing changes. In fact, we've made sure it's clarified, and we call it the 1, 2, 3 step. One, the business owner has to have the no gun sign up. Two, if you enter that business and that business owner sees you there, they have to notify you that you need to leave or you're out of compliance with their policy. And three, if you refuse to leave and the law enforcement shows up, he may be able to take you to jail for misdemeanor trespassing crime. So it's the 1, 2, 3. So in my opinion, if you're dumb enough to stay there and you're dumb enough to try to argue with the property rights owner, you need to go to jail.
But it's important to note that property owner doesn't carry the weight of law in terms of saying, you can be arrested for illegally carrying a weapon on my property.
No, because you have to be offered the opportunity to leave. If you can imagine, if you walk into a restaurant and you've got a shirt that says, you know, Texas is awesome, and the property owner says, no, you're not doing that in here, you need to leave. Well, it's the same exact thing. That property owner has a right to make you leave. Really, the firearm's irrelevant. It's the property owner's right. And we are very strong. OK2A is extremely strong on property owner's rights. The property owner has the right to be stupid. If he doesn't want a law enforcement officer in his property peaceably eating lunch, that's his business if he wants him to leave. So nothing changes here.
What about law enforcement? Now, you've got highway patrol, you've got local sheriffs and local police officers all over the state. They're walking up on a car. There's always been an uneasy alliance there, right? So what happens if this bill passes and I don't have a permit, I'm carrying in my vehicle now, would that be okay at that point?
Yes.
Okay. It's not right now, right?
I mean, if I don't have a permit, now it cannot be loaded. You can have the gun, but it cannot be loaded under current law.
I want to get to the myths and things that people think are real and aren't in just a moment, but law enforcement, what are they saying about this?
Law enforcement, a lot of it depends who you talk to. The guys that are out working the streets and stuff and see people that need to be able to defend themselves and want to be able to defend themselves, and we have a fair amount of law enforcement in our membership at OK2A, are perfectly fine with it. Some of the old school guys that have dealt with this for years they're uneasy about it because it's just not been part of our culture. But what gets me, and I don't want to make it sound insulting, but dadgummit, if every state around us deals with unlicensed carry of some sort and Oklahoma can't, I think our law enforcement is by far good enough to deal with it, just like all the states that surround us. So it's just a matter of getting used to the culture. If you remember back in 1995, there's going to be the shootouts like we discussed earlier. But law enforcement, back in 1997, I got pulled over and they pull up reinforcement 2 cars because I'm licensed for a weapon and I have one on my person. I got pulled over about 3 months ago and I said, "Officer, I'm licensed for a weapon." He goes, "Yeah, whatever, let me just see your driver's license." I mean, the culture is that they know you're not the bad guy. And obviously, the law is written in this bill. You are required to notify the officer upon his request. Now, every trained officer is going to walk up and say, "You got any guns in the car?" And you're going to be required to inform them. You are required to inform them. So we took the pressure off of the person being required to inform them because the officer's going to ask anyway.
There's another bill that's also running its way through the legislature involving medical marijuana and the carrying of
yes, we are working with Senator Dahm on that, and Representative Eccles has one, and I'm still waiting to come back to see the language from Representative Eccles. But what the bill does, it clarifies that if a person has a marijuana card and a weapons license, that the OSBI cannot take the license away, or they're required to provide them if the person has an application in.
Here's the problem,
based on those.
According to federal law, marijuana is still considered a Schedule 1. You can't have a weapon.
Yeah, the fix on this is President Trump just pull this off of Schedule 1 and put it on Schedule 2 as any other prescription, and this thing it would be fine.
Here's my prediction. He's going to do that, but he's going to wait till closer to 2020.
It's amazing how politics gets things done, and elections are great.
Can't believe you would say it's going to be a political deal. Okay. Do's and don'ts if this passes. If you're you've never considered going through the classes, I mean, it's kind of a hassle, right? You've got to get up on a Sunday and go someplace, and it's not much of a hassle. But some people are not going to do it, right?
Well, I go to church on Sunday, so.
Well, a lot of people do. But if you're going to take one of these classes, you're going to spend a lot of time on that, and then you've got to go through the permit thing. What would change in terms of, do you think more people would start carrying?
Yes, because of the fact you don't have to ask the government for permission to do so. You can take that $200 or $300 that you were going to spend just to get the license. Now you can actually put it into actual training, because the Self-Defense Act class, there's not training. You're standing at a line 15 feet away. When I have a class, I spend a lot of time with people with an empty gun, and actually more time with an empty gun, because you just need to get the feel for drawing your weapon. Because it's not speed that's important, it's consistency and being smooth and making sure you've got a good grip on the gun. And you do that without bullets in it. And you can do that in your own living room. And I highly recommend it. But for wherever you're used to pulling from, or wherever your holster is going to be, whether you pull your clothes back to get to it or whether you open carry, you need to practice that. And that's one of the things I work on a lot. Do I see, and people can do this, you can learn this from a video online. And there's countless of them already online. Oklahoma Laws, there are several groups that have the laws posted on what you can do and what you can't do, with attorneys that have provided that. And OK2A, on our Facebook page, we have a direct interaction with people. Where can I carry and where can I not carry? Well, the best rule I can tell you is, if you don't know if you can carry there, don't. It's pretty easy until you become educated on it. City parks, open areas, most public properties, with the exception of it being an educational facility like a school, VOTEC, college, you can carry on. You can even carry in front of the courthouse steps. You just cannot enter that building. So,
not gathering place.
Yes, you can.
Can you not?
Oh, absolutely. Well, in their opinion, you can't. But the fact is, when I had sent a letter to the chief of police in Tulsa, they realized that by law, their officers were not immune from being prosecuted, or I'm sorry, not prosecuted, for civil action, because they're violating a citizen's rights, because you have the right to be in that park. So when they realized that, they pulled back, helping remove people from there who are peacefully carrying. And so basically, it's a bark with no bite. You can go in there, they'll say, well, you're not supposed to be here, and you can just say, have a nice day, and just go do your thing.
I didn't realize that. That's interesting.
Well, that's why you should come to school here more often.
I got to take your class.
Are you getting a fair shake from the media on the coverage of this bill?
I will say it's improved. No, it's not fair. Some people just wish to continue to distort things, but they're more opened up and more. It's more like, okay, we see the trains coming, we're just going to step out of the way. That more type of an attitude. Not that they still agree with it.
Darn media.
Let me ask you this. We know that there's a lot of publicity and a lot of horrible things that have happened over the last 20 years, right? Mass shootings. People say, we've got to do something, I keep waiting for somebody to roll something out there that makes sense, right? What could the pro-gun lobby do that would ease the concerns of people who are scared of weapons? I mean, right? There's people just afraid of them.
Right.
And by the way, if you're carrying, which I learned, you really ought to be afraid of it because you've got to be careful with it, make sure you're pointing down, all the safety things, right?
All right.
Treat it like it's live at every moment. What can be done in this conversation we're having as a nation about gun violence?
The gun violence, and I actually got to speak at a lecture at OU specifically about this, and it's really sad that gun violence is not even in the top 10 related things to death. And it's number 15. Opioid overdose is more people die from that. Even people just giving you the wrong prescription. The doctors, there's more deaths from that. So, which doesn't justify it. It's just that when you see gun violence, it goes to the front of the headlines on everything. But you'll also notice when you see someone actually pull a gun and deter an event that could have been terrible, it doesn't get much traction. It doesn't stay on the headlines because it's, like you guys know, if it bleeds, it leads, or whatever the statement is. So it comes down to education and having all that bad stuff, right in front of you. There's no doubt the horrific events that have taken place were terrible, but it's still, in the broad picture of things, it's not the numbers like some of these other things that take place. And hammers, more people die from hammers and blunt objects than rifle fire. So if you know these facts, it doesn't make a death any lesser, but it puts it in the right context.
What's next for this bill? And when it passes over, do you see this thing eventually landing on the governor's desk? And do you think the governor will sign this bill?
I think the governor is a man of his word. I have no reason to doubt it. He and I have had a conversation several times about this, and in fact, I spoke with him last week about it, and I probably have another meeting with it about this week because we've got a few amendments in the bill that are just minor things to make sure that higher ed is happy with it, that it doesn't come onto the college campus. So I don't see why he won't. House leadership has been awesome. This thing was the very first bill heard right out of the chute. I don't know how much better traction you get than that. Also on the bill, you may not have noticed, there are not 10 co-authors, there's 10 authors on the bill. That's pretty spectacular too, and Representative Eccles, we thank him a lot for his efforts. It'll be on the House floor very, very soon, and will be over in the Senate, and that's 2597. The Senate Bill 12 has not even been scheduled yet, so this bill could actually be in the Senate before Senate Bill 12 could even get scheduled.
Is Dunnington's name on that author list? Really looking across there. I don't think so. I think that's.
Now he's on the red flag bill, which is not going to work in our ballpark.
All right, so we don't know where this is going. We're going to be spending a lot of time on that next weekend. Any closing thoughts?
It's going to be interesting to see where it goes in the Senate. Have you got some concerns?
I've done this long enough to know that you don't take anything for granted. Even the ICE almost messed up the committee meeting yesterday or the other day. So we don't take anything for granted. We're going to continue to push and work on it. I've been informed that the Everytown and the Moms Demand Action Group has hired a lobbyist specifically to come out and kill the bills. So it doesn't surprise me that Mr. Bloomberg would drop another $1 million to do that with. So I'm cautiously optimistic. How's that?
Thanks, Don Spencer.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, Don. Thanks for being here.
You bet.
Good to have you here. All right. Thanks, Mr. Brillbeck. See this again at news9.com/yourvotecounts. Follow me, Scott Mitchell, on Twitter @MitchellTalks. See you next week.